physically tough. You need to blast through it just like you would any other exercise. If you stop short, even just a rep or two short, you'll be compromising your results. If you're training at home and you don't have access to a standing calf raise machine, then I'd suggest performing standing one-legged dumbbell calf raises instead. This is another solid calf exercise that you can perform using a leg press machine. It's pretty straightforward, as you can see here. Again, make sure that you're using as large of a range of motion as you possibly can by lowering the weights down as far as you can get them and pressing them up forward onto the balls of your feet as far as you can. Trying to keep the tension on the calves throughout the entire exercise. And again, just like any other exercise, you've got to take your calf exercises to the point where you can't complete another rep no matter how hard you push. Most people stop far short of where they should. Calf training can be really difficult, but you've got to push yourself really hard if you want to get them to respond. And this is muscular failure right here for calves.
Push.
Another very basic calf exercise that I would normally always include are seated machine calf raises. But interestingly enough, the gym that I'm training at here actually doesn't even have a seated calf raise machine. But that's also another calf exercise that should be included since it targets a different part of the calf region. Standing calf raises target the gastrocnemius, which is the inner and medial portion of the calf, while seated calf raises target the soleus, which is the outer portion of the calf. So for total calf development, it's best to include both a standing and a seated calf raise. A basic standing barbell curl is the meat and potatoes of solid bicep development. You really can't beat it in terms of overall size and strength gains. And you can use either a straight bar or an easy curl bar like I'm using here, whatever's more comfortable for you. And your goal here is to lower the weights until your arms are fully extended, and then curl the weights all the way up until your biceps are fully contracted. And you've got to make sure to move naturally throughout this movement. You shouldn't be keeping your back completely straight and rigid, but instead you should focus on moving naturally, and this will help to prevent injuries and will also allow you to place more overall stress on your biceps. Now, I actually overestimated on this set, and I was only able to complete 4 reps. Now, sometimes what I do in that situation is to implement what's called a rest-pause rep. So I put the weights down, I rest about 10 to 15 seconds, and then I crank out 1 additional rep. And again, this is a technique that you want to use sparingly, because it is a fairly high-intensity technique. But I really want you to watch closely on this last rep here, because this is a great example of the controlled cheating principle, as we call it. Again, traditional advice says that you should never bend your back when performing curls, but it's actually more natural to use a bit of a sway in your back if you absolutely need to. And you can see me doing that right here, only bending my back just as much as it's necessary to keep that weight moving. And this is a great example. Now, I don't always use the rest-pause method. I was probably just showing off a little bit here, but if you overestimate and you can only get 4 reps on your set, it can be a reasonable method to make sure you've achieved total stimulation of the muscle. Take a rest of about 10 to 15 seconds and then crank out 1 more rep, but I would suggest using that technique sparingly. This is probably my favorite overall tricep exercise. It's basically the direct opposite of a barbell curl. The biggest mistake that trainees make on this lift is not using a full range of motion. They usually don't bring the weight up high enough on the negative portion of the rep. Notice how I bring the weight all the way up to my forehead. That's the proper range of motion here. Also note how I've got one leg out in front of the other, and this gives you a much more solid base to work with as opposed to having both feet together. And again, on this set I overestimated and I was only able to complete 4 reps. So I do implement a rest-pause rep here as well. And again, I'm not in my best form during these sessions because of a layoff that I had to take due to my lower back being out. So that's why my weight estimations are off in a few places. But usually when I'm training consistently, I pretty much always land in the proper rep range. So I am going to do a rest-pause rep here. Maybe I'm just showing off a little bit for the cameras here, but in any case. You can see the intensity on this last rep though. Just barely able to squeeze it out. This is what every last rep should look like. Now there's a variety of different attachments that you can use on pushdowns, most of which are acceptable. Straight bars are fine, curved bars, even a lat pull down bar can be used. You can also use a rope for these, although in my experience you can place a lot more overload on the triceps by using some sort of bar. But the biggest thing on this lift is to use a full range of motion by coming all the way up to your forehead and pressing down until your triceps are fully extended. Don't keep your body completely rigid either. You should have one foot in front of the other, and you should be moving loosely and naturally all the way through the movement. Skull crushers are another really basic and powerful tricep builder, and this can be performed in many different ways. You can use a flat or a decline angle. You can even use an incline angle if you really want to. As you can see here, I'm using a slight decline. There's also a lot of different tools you can use to perform this. You can do it with dumbbells, you can use an easy curl bar, you can use a straight bar. Any of those variations are acceptable. So right here I'm performing decline dumbbell skull crushers, lowering the weights down to my forehead and extending until my elbows are fully locked out. And these are a great exercise. I would definitely recommend these, including these in your routine. Just barely squeezing that last rep out. You can also perform these using a slight variation, and that is to bring the weights actually behind your head. This usually only works if you're using an easy curl bar or a straight bar, but you can actually hang your head off of the end of the bench and lower the weights behind your head. And what this does is it increases your range of motion by quite a bit. Either variation works, but it might definitely be something worth trying. I don't usually perform cable curls as I find that the free weight variations are more effective, but this isn't a terrible exercise and I think it could be included in a solid routine from time to time. It's much the same as a regular barbell curl, only using a cable attachment. Lowering the weights all the way down until the arms are fully extended, and then curling the weights all the way up until the biceps are fully contracted. I'd say that these are a pretty powerful bicep builder overall. And again, there are various attachments that you can use here, but I'd go with a basic straight bar, or an easy curl bar works also. As long as those weights are moving, you gotta continue to set. You can see the intensity here. Not able to get that last rep, but that's muscular failure. This here's another very solid tricep exercise. It can be performed in a variety of ways. You can perform it with both hands using a single dumbbell, or you can perform it using an easy curl bar or a straight bar. In addition, you can also perform this exercise from a seated position or from a standing position. Any of those variations are acceptable. So this here is a standing one-arm overhead tricep extension. Just make sure to push the weight all the way up until your triceps are fully contracted, and then bring the dumbbell back down as far as you comfortably can. This is a great exercise for overall tricep development. Notice the struggle here on this last rep, just barely getting it out. And also notice here on the negative, watch my forearm start to slip. You can kind of see that I'm losing control there. And that's how I know that the set has to end, right there.